Hi there, I'm in the process of rebuilding my N54 engine, and before I go any further I wanted to better understand the oiling system to know if there's a way that I could prime the oil system or at least supply some oil pressure to the bearings before starting the engine, especially if it's going to sit for a little while. Anyway, my research, I found there was nothing really available online that I could find. Even new TIS and Real OEM really lack any information about the oiling system on the N54. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about once it's pressurised where it's going. It's really, we're going to talk about the process of it being picked up out of the sump, pressurised, filtered through oil coolers and then back into the block. So, this I may be completely wrong, but from observations of the block and that as I've been working on it, this is how I believe it works. So we'll start here at the front of the engine. The front of the engine, we've got the crankshaft here. That's the front hub, and behind there we have two sprockets. Now this has got an aftermarket one-piece hub. Normally it's a couple of pieces, they're all wedged together, but we have there a chain and sprocket at the bottom of the frame, and that's the timing chain that's dropping out the top of my motor towards the ground, and then the sprocket at the top of the screen is the one there that's coming up to drive the oil pump, and it also drives the vacuum pump on this side. So crankshaft here, this chain runs around in that pattern there, triangle between those three, driven by the crank. As long as the crank is turning, the oil pump is turning. Now, before we get to the pickup, let's have a look at the sump. So this is my sump. Now, it's been modified. It's got an aftermarket dipstick fitted to it. I'm making a separate video on that, so check around my channel or a link in the description for that video when I release it. And I've got a baffle plate welded in here, so that wouldn't normally be in there, but by this being in here, this is a deep cavity in here where the oil pools at the back of the engine. So it's the left side of the sump, front of the engine up here, the back of the engine, that's where the oil is going to pool, and that cutout is made for the oil pickup. There's our oil pickup. So oil is going to go through here, through the pickup, into the pump where it's pressurized. It is a positive displacement pump, so as long as it's primed, it's always going to have an output, a pressure output or a flow output. Now I did rebuild it, and that was months ago, and to be honest I can't recall where the pressure comes out of the pump. I think there's a bypass from memory out the back here, but it goes into the block either through there, that port there, or the one just in behind this bolt here. And so basically from the oil pump we get pressure into the bed plate, or a cavity in the bed plate, which is linked to a cavity in the block, which is linked to a cavity in the head, and it comes out here in this area, which is upside down. So let's turn this engine around and go from there. So the engine's up the right way, so front of the engine there, and around the oil pump pickup down there, oil pump down there. So oil's gone through the bed plate, a channel or a cavity in the bed plate, a passageway I should call it, and it's made it all the way to the cylinder head. That's all it's done since leaving the oil pump, and it comes out through this angled hole here that's labelled from oil pump. So we've come onto the oil filter housing gasket, is this line around here that the N54 is notorious for leaking. Let's have a look at that now. That's what it looks like. So that gasket sits in place like so, and this surface here is what the oil filter housing mounts onto, and this is my oil filter housing. Now turn that over. So here's the cavity from the oil pump. Let's go into there. Let's just try and hold that. There we go. So this is mounted on there like that. The engine's normally slanted, so the oil filter cap, although it's pointing out at an angle, ends up basically vertical once the engine is slanted inside the engine bay. Yeah, so we've got the oil from the oil pump out of there and into this hole here. Now it's got a one-way valve on it, spring loaded, so oil pressure is pushing, like my thumb pushes on there, and the oil can flow through. Now if as soon as the oil pump stops, that closes and it doesn't allow then the oil to drain back through to the pump. So it's a one-way check valve there that the oil pressure itself opens that. That's not a thermostat, it is just opened by the oil pressure. Now from there we need to take this cap off, so I'm still trying to do this all one-handed. And this is a brand new cap because the cage had, well, it was still there, but it had become detached from, I'm going to put this camera down, and so this is a brand new oil filter cap and cage. So if you don't have a cage on there, you're going to run into trouble. That's the part number there of this assembly of this cap here with a cage, and it comes with a little seal there, but not the main seal around the outside. However, these man filters do come with that seal, as well as the sump plug washer, the copper, what looks like a black coloured washer there, and the little green O-ring there. So oils come up into the outside cavity on the outside of the filter, because if you're going to take your filter out and check it for debris, you're looking from the outside inside of all these cleats is where you're going to find any debris. So that's the hole there, that's the one-way valve. Maybe I can push on it. There we go. See that central part moving, and that's where I'm wondering if I could open that somehow from this side, which it doesn't look like there's any easy way. I might look at trying to make a tool up to do it, but if I could open that check valve from this side, from inside, then I could pour oil down that hole, and that would prime my oil pump, so that when I did start the engine, I already had oil in the pump. Otherwise the pump's going to run dry for a little bit. I have lubed it up when I rebuilt it, but it'd be much better if it could run straight away with oil. But anyway, that's that one-way check valve, and so oils come up into the outside of the housing here, and it's met now the filter, and the oil passes through the filter to the inside, and hopefully any debris and everything else is caught on the outside. So we've left the oil pump, we've come up here to this housing, and we've come straight to the filter, and that makes sense. We don't want the oil going anywhere, to lubricate the engine without being filtered. So from the inside here, the oils pass through the inside of the filter, and it drops down around this outside edge, around this outside area where my finger is running. The center hole is what this little O-ring here, when this is installed, that little O-ring blocks that hole in the middle there and stops oil from dropping down in that hole. So the only place it can go is the outside area, like let's say like the shape of the donut. I think I can even stick my finger there from the outside, so it goes there through that little cavity. Now, if you don't have the cage in your filter assembly, if the cage is missing or you don't have that seal on here, and you don't effectively then seal or block that hole, then oil pressure or some of the oil flow and oil pressure is going to bypass the engine and go straight back to the sump. So through that hole there, that drops down and goes to this rectangular cavity under here where my finger is pointing. So let's just see that path. That path aligns with this here and drains back to sump. So if you have failed to put, the cage is missing or that seal is missing, oil's going to come from the oil pump, and a lot of it, some of it, is going to go straight back to sump. This is a smaller hole than that one, so you will still have some oil pressure, but you're not going to have maybe, let's say, sufficient oil pressure to put your car, down the racetrack. And so very important that that you do make sure the cage is present and this O-ring is on it. Anyway, let's say all that's there, and so we're not bypass. Oh, why is that there? Well, when you replace the filter, as you unscrew this, remembering that this whole chamber is full of oil, remember it can't drain back through the one-way valve, and to make it nice and clean and neat for the BMW mechanic or whoever's changing your oil, as soon as you unscrew this and release it, it effectively pulls that O-ring or that seal out of there, and all the oil that's inside of here can drain straight back into the sump. And that's why whenever I'm changing the oil, all I do is come and unscrew this and let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes while I go and make a cup of coffee. And by the time you come back, all the oil, most of the oil's all drained out. If you try and take this straight out, unscrew it and pull it out, you end up with oil spilling over all the sides. So that's the purpose of this O-ring and the cage. So if we're under oil pressure, our little hole in the middle there, put my finger over, it's blocked. So our oil flow and our oil pressure is going out through the bottom. I'll try and find, there we go, where my finger is. So let's turn this over. And which hole did I have that in? So there. So we're now coming around to this side. So we've gone in there through the filter and everything else, and now we've come out of this side. And from here now we are traveling just around here and down into this cavity. So effectively this area where my thumb is actually blocked off on here. It's actually an area that runs up through the middle here. So oil can't pass through. There is actually a little bit of a gap here where it can, so oil can push over onto this side if anything went completely wrong. So there's not actually a seal there, but the majority of the oil flow is going to go out here and into the thermostat housing. So let's take that apart and have a look. While we've got this open, this big gaping hole here is coolant flow. So that's this hole here, which is the coolant coming out from the engine and cylinder head that's flowing through here and back to the radiator. So this is where also, if your oil filter housing gasket, if this gasket fails along this line here, you don't get an external leak, you get an internal leak of either oil crossing over to the coolant or coolant crossing over to the oil. So that's how BMW thought they'd make our lives fun by giving us a way to play tricks on us, thinking we've got a blown head gasket, when in fact it's just oil moving past this line here from the coolants, from the oil side to the coolant side and vice versa. So that side's coolant should normally be blocked off from the oil. So we've come out from the filter, where are we? Here, around here and down into there, and now we're going into the thermostat housing. Let me take this apart. So this is normally mounted up this way. This is the front of the engine, and the lines coming out the bottom here going off to the oil cooler. And this is the thermostat here, but let's get that housing out of the way. So I've got the housing here off, the thermostat housing, but our oil came from the filter up in there, around there, down here, and disappeared down there. That cavity comes out around here where I've got those arrows. So our flow from the filters coming out of that hole down in there, around here, and from this cavity, a little arrow pointing up there, we get ourselves into here. So that's this arrow here. That's part of the same cavity. Turn that around. So you can see that sit like that. That's come off. Our oil's come out of there. It's gone into there, and there's only one place for it to go, and that's down that hole where you see a black spring in there. And from there, if the oil is cold and the thermostat is closed, then the oil flows across here, underneath here, and out this cavity here. We're going to take a look in there in a second. It comes out this cavity here. So it also comes out this cavity here when it's hot, but the thermostat chooses whether or not it bypasses through to the oil cooler or not. So I've put a long bolt in here because it's spring loaded and I didn't want to shoot my thermostat across the garage. So let me put the camera down, and normally this is pushed hard up against there. Actually, before I do, let's talk about a couple of things. There's the gasket for this housing here. So effectively that's also, get the angle of that right, yeah, it's sort of scrunched up a little bit, but that's the gasket there. The other gasket for the thermostat housing. And normally if you're doing this gasket, you always do, sorry, if you're doing this gasket, you do this one at the same time. So gasket 1 and gasket 2. These two gaskets, and I've got the L-ring ones here. Normally I actually buy the genuine ones for these, but I can't remember why I bought the L-ring ones, but I think they're all right. This gasket, BMW don't make or sell this gasket. You can only get it through L-ring, as far as I know, and that's the gasket for here, for the thermostat housing. So as far as BMW is concerned, this part is a sealed unit, and all they do is sell the whole assembly already pre-assembled. But that's L-ring do sell, and there's the part number for it. 074.860 is the part number for this thermostat cover. So that's normally pushed down hard against there. As I said, I've got a longer screw in here. I'm going to put the camera down. Actually, no, I don't need to. I'll just do that. Let's get that out of there. And now we are looking inside here at the thermostat, and you'll see the thermostat has holes in it. So even when it's, let's say, closed, and the oil's hot and it closes, so it actually pushes down inside of there and blocks the oil from flowing around the outsides of that. However, the oil still can flow through it. So let's pull it out and have a look, and you'll see that it has holes in it, so there's always some flow able to come through it, but the majority of flow actually just flows around it. Try and get the camera, let's get that spring out of there. So you can see inside of there, and about sort of halfway down, well actually towards the bottom, you see on the right there the opening. I don't think I can, that's where the oil's coming through. I can't get my finger there at the same time, maybe. There we go. So where my finger is, that's where the oil's coming through. And now on the, now that's on the left. On the right side, you see an opening basically directly opposite it, and that's this channel here, or this passageway here, which will go off to the oil cooler. So oil's going to, if the thermostat is closed, then most of the oil, remembering some can go through the holes here, but the majority of oil is forced out of this and through the oil cooler, and then back here into this port here, which aligns with this cavity here where it came out if it was cold, whether it's cold or hot. So a bit hard to see. Try and get the angle. It's sort of it's on the left of frame there. It's the rectangular opening just on the left side there. And so now the oil, whether it's hot or cold, is inside of this cavity here, and it can flow out here where my finger is, and it comes out of here. So whether it's gone in there, and if it's cold, it's gone straight across there and out this side. If it's hot, most of it has come out the bottom through the oil cooler, back in there and into the same cavity. So this, interestingly, this other cavity on here is actually a coolant cavity, and it goes nowhere. It's completely blocked off. There is nowhere for it to go. I have no idea why BMW has done that. Maybe to give us another source of mixing some coolant and oil, just to make money for their workshop, because yeah, this is another place where if you have oil in your coolant or coolant in your oil, this is where the seal along this edge here, if it's failed, then the two can mix. And so that I suspect, I can't see any reason why it's there. That's this hole here. That's it on the where the oil thermostat mounts to the oil filter housing, and it is part of this open cavity here, which is where coolant is passing from the cylinder head and back out to the radiator. So the only thing I can think of is maybe it's there to try and bring some warmth to this area, to warm the aluminium, to help, you know, maybe warm the oil. I don't imagine it's transferring much heat, or to maybe try and help operate the thermostat. So by bringing some warm coolant in here, maybe it helps warm the aluminium for the thermostat to move. I don't know, but it's a bit unusual. So we came out of that port. Our pressure oil has been through the filter, through the thermostat. Either maybe it's gone off to the oil cooler, maybe not, but it's come out of that port there. And that port there is this port on here, this small one at the top. The oil was going through this hole, back into this side of the oil filter housing. So it's now in this cavity here. And that cavity is where it gets taken back to the engine. So you orientate this the right way. So that's on there like that. We're talking about, I keep putting this down. I'm talking about this cavity here. And so when that sits on there, that is giving pressure here to this port to go to the engine. So we came from the oil pump, we went through everything. We had our drain back to Sump when you remove the oil filter cover, or if you're missing your cage or your O-ring, but otherwise the oil pressure is going back down through there. So that's where it then goes to the engine, and it branches out to a bunch of different places. I'm not going to cover it in this video, but some of the things that it's obviously going to do is the bearings, the main bearings, the conrod bearings, the oil squirters underneath the pistons, as well as the Vanos system. So we've got some Vanos solenoids up here. The other side of the block here, there's some filters that the oil passes through here to get to the Vanos for the camshaft timing. But yeah, once it's inside of the block there, I don't think there's any real priorities. It just goes to all of those different places and they use it as they need it. Now, I'll take the opportunity as well, in case you're looking at this thermostat housing on the front of your engine and you're wondering which is the line out to the oil cooler and which is the line back. I don't think I really made that clear before the way I was holding it. So this is the front of your engine there. This is the front of your engine. This is the top on here. And so there's our little thermostat cover on that side. The oil is coming out there off to the oil cooler, and when it comes back, it's coming back on that side. So the engine is sitting over on the left side. So this port here furthest from the engine is where it goes out to the oil cooler, and that's where it comes back if you're trying to determine which way it's flowing to and from your oil cooler. Apart from that, while my battery was charging a little bit, I played around in here. Let me get this up the right way. I'm trying to work out a way, as I said earlier, see if I can find a way to hold that little one-way check valve here open, this one here, because I want to be able to prime the oil pump, and I think I've discovered a way. So it's all plastic, there's nothing magnetic, couldn't use a magnet to open it, but I've got it's probably like a 14 gauge screw, just a fraction of a turn in there. Okay, there we go. So I can grab hold of that from that side. Effectively, there we go. I can open and close, and now the screws just come off in my hand. It's only in there a fraction of a turn. But basically, that's all I'm using, just a large wood screw, and I can get it into the hole there in the center of that, pull on it, open that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that screw in there, pull on it with my fingers, and pour some oil in and let it all flow back down through there. And that's going to go back down this hole here and hopefully down into the oil pump. And look, it's probably not going to completely prime the oil pump, but it does mean that I'll have less time once the oil does prime, that I'll then be pushing oil through to the engine sooner.